Hey, friends. Welcome back to this episode of Test Those Breasts. I am your host, Jamie Vaughn. And today I am so excited to have my new breastie on my show, Coach Brynn Barale. Brynn is a registered nurse, holistic health coach, and 17-year breast cancer thriver. She was diagnosed with stage 1 ERPR positive HER2 negative breast cancer when she was 26 years old. She is here today to share her story about the struggles of her life with breast cancer and also to share tips on how she empowers breast cancer survivors to lose weight without dieting. Woo! Brynn has been a registered nurse for 13 years with a strong expertise in women's health. She combines this clinical evidence-based background with her health coaching expertise to focus on helping breast cancer survivors lose weight, be more confident, and live a kick-ass life after cancer. Her Life Beyond program is a blueprint for weight loss and transformation after breast cancer. Brynn, thank you so much for being here. It's so good to see you. And thank you for putting up with my dogs in the background. I've got two German Shepherds who just are so loud. And but anyway, I just am really happy
Good,
that you're
and
here.
thank
How
you for
are you?
having me. I'm excited to be here. I have a snoozing dog at my feet as well, so we'll see what happens.
It is what it is. I feel like after when COVID hit, all of us were working from home and we had our dogs sitting, at our feet and all the things. And I just feel like sometimes people take podcasting a little bit too seriously and don't really remember that we're all human and we all live with other people. So it's not a big deal to me. This is all about conversation about breast cancer and how we can help others out there, help them advocate for themselves and empower them to be, someone who can get through cancer as best that they can. So, yeah, thanks. So, I want our audience to know more about Brynn. Well, first of all, can you tell us,
44.
because how old are you now? Okay, so
Mhm.
you were diagnosed when you were 26. Is there a little glimpse that you can give to us that you remember who Brynn was before breast cancer? That might be
Yeah,
hard to do. I
so
mean,
I'm going to try not to get emotional, but if I would describe myself before breast cancer, I was relatively carefree, right? But I was also very driven, and not saying that I'm not driven now, but it was a different drive. It was more to like do the right things, right? Oh, go to college, get your master's degree. At that time, I was working in public accounting. So it was get your master's degree, sit for the CPA exam, and do the right things because that's what you're supposed to do. So if I had to say anything, I feel like I was very hard on myself before breast cancer. In a way, I feel like I'm living in reverse. And the older I'm getting, the more carefree I'm getting. And definitely life after cancer teaches you to really pay attention to the shit that really matters, you know? So yeah.
right, right. That's so interesting because, not a lot of people that usually everybody's doing it the other way, right? I know a lot of young 20 something year olds who work their tail off to get, to the place that they want to be. And they just work so hard for all their lives. I mean, I've worked hard all my life. I was super, super driven, super um, too busy, I guess, had too many things on my plate. My husband would tell you that I still have too many things on my plate, but to me, it's a different situation here where I am driven and I'm driven to help breast cancer, patients and bring education to people who've never even had breast cancer so that they have it on their radar and understand what to look for and all those things. So that's why I like to talk to people like you, is because we're all in this together. We're a sisterhood of all sisterhoods. And now, obviously we have a brotherhood out there as well. So, yeah, I love the fact that you're doing it sort of backwards as to, what society expects of people, I guess. So tell us about your treatment, your diagnosis
Yeah,
and your treatment. What was that like?
I found my lump myself. Um, Not by doing a self breast exam. It was totally by just by chance. I had my tumor was at the top of my breast, and so the skin was starting to change, and because of that skin change, it was itchy. So I went to go scratch it, and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" Like, oh, okay. And of course, this was in 2006. Google existed, but it was a much different land than it is now. But still, I got on Dr. Google, and the only thing it came up with was breast cancer. And I was like, I'm 26. Like, that's not that's not it. Even though I have a very strong history of breast cancer in my family, I watched my grandmother die from metastatic breast cancer, very familiar with it, but it was not at 26. That was when you were in your 60s. That's what happened. That was so I kind of dismissed that lump for a few months until I went to my annual GYN appointment. And I was like, oh, by the way, I have this lump. Oh, we'll look at it, and we discussed family history too. And so when my gynecologist did my breast exam, she's like, oh, let's do an ultrasound. And she still is a rogue doctor. I'm still friends with her to this day, but she was like, we're going to do a biopsy today so that you'll know that nothing is wrong. And I was like, okay. So she literally, I believe I held the ultrasound wand while she stuck the needle in and did a biopsy. Literally, that I've never heard anybody having that done. Like, I know it was a little, yes.
Oh
Anyways,
my.
so I found out 2 days after Christmas that I had breast cancer. And all I could think about, because the only people I knew who had breast cancer died, my grandmother, my great grandmother. I had another grandmother who had breast cancer as well, who died. So both grandmothers and great grandmothers, that's all I knew was you got breast cancer and you died. And I didn't know anybody who was thriving after breast cancer, especially at such a young age, right? So it was like, of course, that's naturally where I wanted to go with my thoughts. But I quickly, put my big girl panties on, and it was like, you're going to do everything you can for that not to happen. And my healthcare team was outstanding. And I had a lumpectomy, within a month, lumpectomy, started chemo. As soon as I was healed from that, I feel like it was like 3 weeks later, I started chemo. I did dose stents, chemotherapy, adriamycin and Cytoxan. So the 4 cycles of that. And then during chemo, I also started a clinical trial of ovarian suppression with an aromatase inhibitor, which is now the standard of care for so many women obviously premenopausal with the ovarian suppression. And then I had radiation and was done and normal, right? That's what, like, I wanted that like moment of radiation to be done so that I could get back to working and doing all the things that I wanted to do. And I was really swiftly reminded that there was no normal. Nothing was ever going to go back to the way it was. And it doesn't mean that it has to be doomsday, right? It can be a beautiful life that you get to craft because of breast cancer. But there's that,
Yeah.
I was not in a good space those 5 years that I was in that medical menopause, for sure. So
Yeah, you really were thrown into things way, way quicker than a lot of us. That just sounds so scary. And I'm just so grateful that your medical team was so amazing and that you had your doctor just say, let's just go ahead and do this and not tell you, oh, you're too young. It's probably just
Mm-hmm.
you're on your period or whatever it is. She actually took it seriously and wanted to make sure that everything was okay. Um, that must have been really scary too when you found out and thinking to yourself, holy cow, everyone else I know has died from this. Things have changed dramatically since then, even since 2006. And there's just so much more information out there and so much more support, medications and treatments and things like that. So luckily you were able to move through that. How did you move through that mentally?
Like I was walking in through mud, like I was stuck in quicksand, to be honest. It that I think is something that I didn't anticipate, because I've just always been an optimistic, positive, forward thinking person, that I would be the one that was depressed. And oh, but if I was depressed, I would know it. Bullshit. It took my husband to call
Mm-hmm.
me out on it before I realized that's what was going on. I just thought, oh, I'm tired, or oh, geez, you just went through all of this, treatment. You deserve to, whatever it is, take a nap or whatever it was, right? But it was like, no, I was really struggling. And until I got called out on it, and then it was like, oh, that's what's going on. Oh, that makes sense. And then it was
Mm-hmm.
literally, okay, one foot in front of the other. Like, how can I get on the other side of this? What's going to make me feel good right now? And then tomorrow, and then a month later. And it was a matter of, at the time, I was an avid runner. And it was like, oh, remember when you get done running, you're always on that runner's high. Maybe that'll be the ticket. And so I just started running even more. And I ran my first half marathon. I ran my second half marathon. And it was just like, okay, like this is wellness, right? This is taking care of my body, but it was also taking care of my mind. And I don't think I understood that, how important that was,
Mm-hmm.
until again I was on the other side of things and the veil lifted and you're like, oh, this is how I'm supposed to feel,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was like, and then
Yeah.
when I took things the next step further by paying attention to the food I was eating, I was like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to feel this way. Like, does everybody know that if you just do the quote unquote right things, that you can feel amazing and have energy and really have good mental health? Like, it was just like, how come we're not talking about this?
Yeah. And I'm so glad that we are, there's so much out there now where people are talking about it. Like when we go through cancer, it's not just about the diagnosis and the treatments like, chemo and radiation and your surgeries and things like that. This is a holistic care, strategy. And I was the same way before I even started chemo. I was so scared, depressed, pissed, all of it. And it wasn't, and I knew, like when I was 54 at the time, so I knew things that I should be doing for, anxiety and depression. I've kind of struggled with a little bit of that throughout my whole entire life. And I used to be a runner too until my knees and my hips were like, nope. But I still love to get out there and get my heart rate up and things like that. I knew that those things did help. Never actually, when my mother died in 2019, that just threw me to the ground and that put me, just kind of tumbled me. And I had to think of things to do to get myself out of that depression and, things like that. And so before I started the chemo, I reached out to Eddie Eniver,
Mm-hmm.
a therapist out of Australia. I think you and I may have had a conversation about this. And he's the one that said, look, I'm a 3-time cancer survivor, and I had to figure out why the hell I was getting cancer over and over again. And he wasn't really paying attention to why and what was happening. And he started figuring out, okay, I got to take care of my diet. I've got to take care of my mental health to get through this, because there are some people who get the cancer and they just don't do anything. They're just so stuck. And so I love the fact that you're a living, breathing cancer thriver who figured it out, and kudos to your husband for calling you out on it. And that's so. This tells me that your husband was he a good caregiver for you?
Yes, he was. I also had family who stepped up and came and visited and stayed with every chemo treatment as well, because I was working enough to keep my health insurance, because that was the game, right? That's the game. I had to keep my health insurance, but it wasn't full time. So we needed him to keep working. So it was like, how is he going to keep working so that we can pay our bills? So it was like, okay, well, my dad came in. My mom was here for my surgery. My dad came for my first chemo. My aunt came for my next chemo. My other aunt came for the next chemo. And then my brother came and his wife came for my last chemo. It was like, how can we keep other areas of our life kind of going, right, while this storm is going on really inside the house. So he did take care of me, but we also had a lot of support. And the thing is, we had literally moved to where we live now in Western North Carolina 6 months before I was diagnosed. So no family, no friends. It was like we were on an island all alone, and had this catastrophic thing happen. And it was like, so I think it was a matter of just calling on the support that we needed. But you know,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, you didn't have any familiarity as to where you were, only 6 months, and that must have been just so scary. It's interesting because
he's
was your
he's
husband
five
around the
years
same
older
age
than
you
I am.
were
Yeah.
at the time?
Mhm.
Okay. So, I mean, we talk about couples. My husband and I were interviewed on my podcast because we were talking about, caregiving and husband wife dynamics throughout something like this. And I know that the last statistic I've heard is that 40% of marriages break up because of diagnosis like this. So I always just find it so inspirational when that doesn't happen, and because it's a lot to go through for both people. And so kudos to your husband. What a wonderful person. um I want to talk to you about, is there anything that you would have done differently, knowing what you know on the other
Mm.
side? What would you have done differently?
Asked, if I knew what I know now, right then, I would have sought more support for when treatment was over, because you have so much support when all of that's going on, whether it's even support from going to the doctor's office all the time, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be support from your family and friends, but I did have so much support from my family and friends, and care packages in the mail and phone calls and cards and all of the things. And then,
Mhm.
you're done,
Mhm.
radiation was done, and then it was like crickets, and it was like, wait a minute, this is when I need the support. I was so busy with everything that I didn't even know what was happening,
Mhm.
and then all of a sudden it slows down, and I did not anticipate the way I would feel, that void that I felt from being a patient all the time to not being a patient all the time. It was
Right.
like, wait a minute, where are all the people? Like, so I did not anticipate that. So I think if I could
Mhm.
have known that was coming, to set up more support for after, for when things kind of slow down, um, I would have really, I think, not fell into that pit of depression like I did.
That's such a good point that you bring that up. That actually happened to me too on two different occasions after my breast surgery. So a year ago, February, I fell into quite a depression. And some of my audience knows that I was diagnosed 1 week after I retired from the school district. So I was literally in my first year of retirement when I was diagnosed. And when I got out, when I was disease free, I was trying to figure things out. Like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't, like, there's no more doctor's appointments. I mean, I had doctor's appointments because of other things, but not to the
Mhm.
capacity that it was, right? And so I really could not, I was like, what the heck is going on with me? And my husband and I were not connecting. He was already in his second year of retirement. He's thinking to himself, yeah, she just needs to be back to normal. And I kept on saying, I don't think there's such a thing, babe. And so we really went through some hard times and ended up going to therapy together because of it. In fact, we're still in therapy, and I'm just very much advocate for couples to be in therapy even when things are going great. It is just so good for the marriage because there's so many changes that happen throughout life from the time that we get married through, sickness and in health and all that. But we started going to therapy, and I finally figured out that I needed to do something for the breast cancer community, which is why I started the podcast. But literally less than a year later, just last September and October, I was already about a year and a half out from my diagnosis, and I fell into another crazy depression. I realized I was experiencing some really bad, like some PTSD. And I continued to go to therapy, to my own therapist, and I still go to her. So I recognized it. And so that is such good advice, Brynn, for you to bring into this conversation, because I think that a lot of people really truly do think that you should go back to normal. You should be going back to normal. Everything should be fine. And it just isn't the same. And if we can recognize that early on and understand that, we can set ourselves up for
Mhm.
success into our survivorship. Um, you have some really amazing things going on in your survivorship. Can you share with us about who Coach Brynn is and what you do for the
Yeah,
breast cancer community?
so in a nutshell, right, to summarize what I do and why I do it, I should say, is that I I get to work with breast cancer survivors every day now as a holistic health coach. And what I focus on is really empowering breast cancer survivors to lose weight without dieting. And the benefits of that, right, are so that you're stronger, you're more confident, and then hopefully so that you're living a kick ass life after cancer. And I have created a program for my clients that I wish I had, right? And when my clients are working with me, they're like, I didn't quite know what to expect, but this is everything I wanted. And it's like, I just love that. I mean, it's like just this boost, of their confidence. I literally see their energy levels shifting as I work with them. And you get to, even on Zoom in this virtual world, you can feel people's energy through the screen. And when you can see that shift,
Mhm.
it's like, it's so beautiful and so amazing. And I'm just so, I'm moved quite frequently that I get to work with breast cancer survivors in this life after breast cancer. Um, so, yeah, in a nutshell, that's what I'm doing right now.
I think that's so amazing. And I know that incredible feeling becoming friends, really, right, with these breast cancer survivors. I never knew that I could connect with so many women across the globe in this way. And so it is, yes, it is a club we don't want to be in, but it is the best club. And it makes my heart happy every single day because of it. And so I know that feeling. Um, you talk about losing weight without dieting. I think a lot of people have a different view of dieting. So like, you have to restrict this, restrict that, not eat, certain things or whatever it is. And I know that eating in itself is our diet, right? What we put in our body is our diet. It's just making sure that you're putting the right things in your body. I always liken it to, because I was a health coach with a program, and I had lost some weight that worked really, really well for me. I did not feel deprived or anything, and it was great. And I learned that, our bodies are kind of like a car. You can't, first of all, you have to put fuel into your body for it to work. A car is not going to, even operate properly if you don't put oil in it, if you don't put gas in it, and, things like that. It's the same thing with food is, if you put shitty things in your body, it's not going to run really well. I mean, you can go ahead and put shitty things in your body, but you're going to probably have some breakdowns, and you're not going to have a car that operates for long, right? You're going to run into something. And by the way, I do want to myth bust a little bit about cancer. When I got cancer, I don't know about you, I was healthy. I was at the healthiest of my life. And it turns out that healthy people can actually get cancer, right? We all have cancer cells. We have different situations that happen. Like for me, I am thoroughly convinced it was stress and trauma that led to mine, to being open to being struck with cancer. But if your body is healthy, they have found that people can move through cancer better. They can recover from certain things better. And so I think that's such a great connection. So thank you for doing that. And I know that in the show notes, we have your website, your social media, how people can reach you. I think that's great. So we spoke, this is really, really such a huge topic that I talk to people about all the time. In fact, there is a week-long conference that's been going on. Dr. Tiffany Troso Sandoval has been putting on, and it's a panel of doctors and other therapists and specialists that help us. They come on there and they have this talk and help us understand certain parts of cancer and how to get through cancer and things like that. And one of the conversations was, and by the way, Tiffany Troso is through Winning the Cancer Journey, and it is recorded, and people can go on to her Facebook and access that whole week. It's still going on tonight and tomorrow. But we were talking about this idea of doctors having a toolbox. I know that when I first went into my oncologist, I was given this huge stack of stuff, right? At the beginning of my diagnosis. And I'm like, I don't even think I ever looked in it because I was so overwhelmed, right? But the point is that if doctors recognize that a patient is having issues with something, they're having trouble, they're having mental problems, they're just really struggling with something, whether it be with their diet, what to eat, all the things, taking care of their mental health, those doctors need to have a toolbox. It's much like a teacher, right? My whole entire teaching career, I had a toolbox. If I recognized that a student was struggling with something, I had something in my toolbox that I could give to them to help them, or I would direct them in a way that it would assist them to be able to move forward. That is, to me, is crucial for doctors. A lot of doctors have not had cancer. They don't understand completely what their patients are going through. They know what to give them to, help them survive. physically, like get the cancer out of there, but they don't really necessarily understand the mental health part of it, the other holistic care that's needed. If someone came into, their doctor and they're really struggling with body image, they're just not, they're feeling sluggish or whatever it is, perhaps they could have something in their toolbox that could help them with
Yes.
nutrition, right? So,
Yeah,
what
so
are your
I
thoughts
love
on
this
that?
topic, by the way, because I've been saying for years, if I get invited to speak at a lot of support groups and to do different things, and I always do my best to empower these people in the room. And the way I feel like we can sum up what you just said, right, is that your doctor knew what chemotherapy you needed, how much you needed, what if you wanted to be on tamoxifen or exemestane or whatever, right? They knew that information. And thank goodness we have people who know this information. However, the true healing is up to you. It's not them. They're not going to help you live a kick-ass life after cancer. They're going to keep you alive. Yes, right? They're going to hopefully put you into remission, or if it's not able to be in remission, to keep you at a quality of life to be able to do the things that you want to do while you have life. But their job is not really to heal you. That is our job. So if they had a toolbox, right, it would be things, different resources of, oh, you're depressed. Okay, here's a good therapist. Here's a couple names of some therapists to go see. Oh, you have no energy and you've gained 30 pounds because of tamoxifen. Oh, great. Here's somebody you could go see, whether it's a health coach, a nutritionist, a dietitian, somebody who understands the way the body works with food and how
Mm-hmm.
what you eat can impact your entire life, right? I remember going to my oncologist and talking about sexual health, right? After being put into medical menopause. And it's like, oh, I don't know anything about that. It wasn't even, right? It was like, oh, I don't talk about that. And it was like, oh my gosh, okay, well, so I'll talk to my gynecologist, I guess. But, on the form, you asked me if I have any enjoyment in my life or what, like you asked the question. So if I
Yeah.
put a negative answer, we should be talking about that, right? Or the other thing is, I remember talking to my oncologist even about like, should I be drinking alcohol? And oh well, just enjoy your life. And it was like, but should I be drinking alcohol? That's a different thing for me to understand what the alcohol is doing in my body to allow me to make that decision as to whether I want to drink or not. But it was just like, no, you're fine. Oh, that's normal. I don't know how many times I heard that's normal. And while it's really nice to normalize some of these things, right? It is good to know that a lot of us breast cancer survivors feel the same way. But that doesn't mean that we have to be in that place, right? It doesn't have to mean you have to stick in that place. You can be better and have more energy and sleep better and have less hot flashes and all the crap that happens to us. So I feel like the toolbox would be
Yeah.
resources. And in an ideal world, we would have this integrative cancer centers. I mean,
Yes. 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 I was just going to say that I really feel like everyone should have a general or an oncologist, right?
yeah,
But also have an integrative oncologist,
yes,
because there's so much more there's so much more work that needs to be done. And what a great point that you make, that they ask
right.
on those
Yeah,
questionnaires, how's your sex life or whatever, however they word it. And for them not to be able to talk, even say anything, it's like, no, you know what? Here is an intimacy therapist. I just interviewed one, Tracy Owen, just last week, and she was phenomenal. and let Tracy talk to you about it, because she is super well versed when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
sexual health, with cancer. And the oncologist doesn't have to say, oh, know anything, but hey, here's her card, call her up. She has great discounts for cancer patients or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's like, why are you asking me then? What's the point?
Yes, it
Is it
is.
just like protocol, yeah, no, yeah, so like that the toolbox of resources is what we need, but the integrative uh centers would be so great to
Mm-hmm.
have for every single cancer patient. And if there's not one in your area, I know that there are integrative oncologists at
Yeah.
least in the area where people can consult with. We have one here, at least one that I know of, but anyway, I just and on that the panel that I was just telling you about, the conference that's going on right now, the very first night there was an integrative
Oh, love
oncologist,
that.
who was really cool, really neat. Yeah, no, seriously. So I want people to go to Winning the Cancer Journey on Facebook and find it, and then people can see who the panel is. It's just so
Yes, it is.
knowledge is
I know. Well,
power,
and
Brynn.
that's what led me on my journey, right? Was um I was diagnosed in that era of Chris Carr, um, who is a cancer thriver. She lives with, I mean, she's been living 20 years with a cancer that can't be cured, right? And she had come out with a books, and she had I guess, I don't know, a show on TV, but it was like a movie, but I guess it was real life. What's the word I'm looking for? Anyways, yeah,
I
documentary. There you go.
recognize it
That's
as
the
a
word I'm looking
documentary.
for. And it was by watching
Mm-hmm.
that, and it was like, oh, okay, like making these connections. And then plus, I'm kind of like a data nerd. So I started doing all this research into like scientific studies of like what actually works, like evidence based research of what actually works to keep healthy, right? Yes, you can be healthy with cancer, but as you said, if you're healthy and you get a cancer diagnosis, you're gonna more than likely have a better outcome than somebody who goes into their cancer diagnosis
Yeah.
unhealthy. And I've witnessed that happening. And we
Mm-hmm.
have all these different treatment options now. And being empowered to know that you have decisions and you can say no to things if you want to, but to know what's going to happen. And sometimes, like, the oncologists, depending on where they are in their studies and how well they keep up with the data, they might not know those answers. And so it's a matter of being able to find out some of this stuff yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, I had somebody give me a really scary statistic the other day, and I was like, I don't think that's true, but I don't know for sure, but I'm going to go find out if that's true or not, because that's just how my brain works. I'm not going to just accept it because somebody said it.
Right.
I'm going to go,
Right. And there's a lot of chatter out there. So you have to be real careful about who you're listening to, like people who are saying, mammograms are bad for you. It's like,
yeah,
oh,
I
no,
know.
mammograms save
Oh,
lives.
it's so
you
true.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So I want to touch real quickly on alcohol. It was about a year and a half, maybe about a year and a half, maybe a little bit less, when I had lost my weight. I lost about 33 pounds, and I
Mm-hmm.
heavily cut back on alcohol. So, that's one of the biggest
Yeah.
things that people are concerned about when you go into a diet, right? Um, oh, well I'm, what am I going to do? I like to drink wine. Okay. So my health coach told me, okay, so have a glass of wine every once in a while. So what I ended up doing to wean myself
Mm-hmm.
off, because I had been a drinker all my life, right? And so what I did is I took a big wine glass, huge, and filled it with ice all the way. and then I would literally measure out 4 ounces of white wine, and then I would fill it up with bubbly water, and I would sip on that thing all night long. So it wasn't like I was having one glass of wine after another after another. It was just that one glass of wine, and it was a nice wine spritzer. And that's how I actually weaned myself off of alcohol. And when I got cancer, I did not have anything to drink at all as far as alcohol throughout the whole entire time, except I had one glass of wine right like the night before my my surgery. And then every so often I'll have a glass of wine, or it's very, very rare though. I do know that since I have drastically cut back to almost hardly ever, I have felt
Yeah,
so much better.
I know. And
It's
yeah, that's a
amazing.
great way, right? Of still being, I like the taste of alcohol, right? So if you have a spritzer like you described, you can still have that taste of alcohol. It's in a fancy glass. I mean, right? Like it's a drink. But hormonally speaking, especially as we age and our livers have done a lot of work, and especially after chemo and radiation and medications, right? Our livers are even working harder. So we don't metabolize that alcohol like we did in our younger years, right? And that's what makes us feel shitty. That's where the hangovers and the headaches and all of the things come
Mm-hmm.
from. But you can, I tell my clients, you can have a drink here or there. Absolutely. Just don't expect to be losing weight while you're drinking alcohol. You can maintain your weight loss,
Right. Right.
absolutely. But typically it's because, and it's part of it is the alcohol, but part of it's when we drink alcohol, oh, then we lower our inhibitions and we eat stuff or eat more of it than we normally would have, or we eat later into the night, or whatever it is, right? It's like, and I know that's it. It's like alcohol. Oh, I want something salty, and then yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Whatever it
One more
is. And
taco.
then you wake up the next morning and your fingers are swollen. You can't get your rings off and you're like, oh, I don't feel good. And it's like, yeah, ding dong. But I think the way is, and it's about, and that's why I say the weight loss without dieting is because when we think of dieting, we think of deprivation, we think of restrictions, we think of all the things we can't do. And like you said, it's no, what about all the things that you can do, and do more of that, do more of the other stuff and less of the wine. It's not that you don't have the wine, but there's so many
Yep.
people who are all or nothing. There's like no gray, right? It's all or nothing. And it's like, no, life is not all or nothing. It's about celebrations. It's about having the cake and the wine and going out for these special things, and it's about finding that middle road that is sustainable. And that is, yes, it's the balance, and that is
And
the weight loss
balance.
without dieting, is how to find that middle road for you. And it's truly possible.
Yep.
I
Yep.
mean,
Yeah.
so oh,
I,
thank you.
you're so fun to talk to. I love it. You have a couple of, well, first of all, I want to ask you another question, but I want to well, and you can actually bring this into this next question because you've already touched on this a little bit. I always ask people, what what are some really good pieces of advice you would give someone who has never been diagnosed? And I bring this up every single time because I really like to focus on an audience of people who've never been diagnosed,
Mhm.
because there were so many things I did not know before cancer, and I knew a ton. I knew so much. You
Yeah.
knew a lot because you had it in your family, right? But then you get hit with it, and there's so many things that you don't know. And so I want, and I have had a couple of friends say, well, why is part of your audience people who've never been diagnosed? It's not even on their radar. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's why it needs to be on the radar. And look at you. Like, I don't care if you're in your 20s and 30s, you're not too young. I mean, you got cancer when you were 26. And even people who do not
Yes.
have it in their families, get it when they are younger. So we need to have it on people's radars. It's not to say it's gonna happen. Knock on wood, it doesn't, but you will absolutely know someone who will get it. And it's nice to be able to be educated and have
Mhm.
awareness so that you can support those people. So, what kind of advice do you have that you can leave with our audience? And you can certainly bring in some of the resources that are going to be in the show notes.
So, the advice that I have for folks who have not been diagnosed with breast cancer is one to, be your own advocate. So, if you were to find something in your body that just doesn't feel right, be the advocate for yourself, be empowered to go and see a specialist, a doctor, somebody who will listen and take your concerns seriously. Because I found my own lump at 26 years old. I waited months until I went to the doctor, but that doctor at that time was like, hey, let's be sure this is nothing. And if she told me to come back in 6 months or a year, I probably would have done that. Because, yeah, Dr. Google told me that the only thing that I could have was breast cancer, right? But I was 26 years old. So I was like, well, 26-year-olds don't get breast cancer. And that was, pretty much her thing too, was you're so young, but we're going to still do the biopsy to prove that this is nothing. So I thank her all the time, send her cards. We're good friends. And I'm grateful that she listened, but you don't always have someone who listens or is willing to do the next step to prove something, whether it is cancer or benign, right? So you have to be willing to find that provider and to advocate for yourself that, hey, something's not right. I'm not feeling right. Because for the 5 years leading up to my diagnosis, I wasn't feeling right. I went to multiple doctors and I got these silly diagnoses I was even told once I had an overactive colon. Instead of somebody like listening to me and being like, oh, this young girl is falling asleep at a red light, right? Her lab work is normal. And I'm using air quotes here, right? Like normal. Your lab can be normal. Lab work can be normal and you can have cancer, y'all. So that's where speaking up for myself. So I gave in to the system at some point in time and was like, oh, I'm just tired. That's what they keep telling me is I'm just tired. Everything is normal. And, I don't know at that 5 year earlier, like if they would have done imaging, if the breast cancer would have showed up, I don't know. But, it's still that thing that you do get worn down quickly by these folks in healthcare. And it was like, okay, well, everything must be fine. So that would be my advice. Advocate for yourself. Talk to people about what's going on with your health and kind of get a gut check that way too. Because I kept
Yeah,
things
it's
to
so
myself.
yeah, yeah, and you were so young. So why would you even think something like that in the first place? And I just, I've interviewed several people who had breast cancer at, such a young age. And it's just appalling and it seems to be, increasing. And so, and I don't want people to be like hypochondriacs thinking every little thing is something, but we should know when something is not normal. And you're right, like I'm sorry, falling asleep at a red light, I mean, that's pretty scary. And I mean, for me, it was when I was like exhausted like that and I was forgetting things or falling asleep, it was Hashimoto's for me. I had an autoimmune. And so I know that can affect a lot of bodies as well. And I just think being, making sure that we're not ignoring and at the very least getting checkups and letting your voice be heard and listening to podcasts and listen. And we're not doctors. but we do have our own lived experiences. And I feel that that is incredibly powerful. And of course, I do bring experts, surgeons and oncologists and radiologists and therapists and things, people like that, which helps, really build our awareness and knowledge. So I just really appreciate, Brynn, your being here to tell your lived experience and helping other people. I appreciate what you do in your survivorship. And yeah, so is there anything else you'd like to leave us with before we wrap up?
No, just if you are a breast cancer survivor and you are curious about what it looks like to work with a health coach, like I would love to talk to you and give you a free coaching session. So seek me
I
out
love
on
that.
the socials. I'm on Instagram at Your Kick-Ass Life After Cancer, and I share good things on there all the time and by email. But really, the way I give back to our community is by doing, I mean, of course, I have clients who pay me for health coaching too, but I do so many complimentary sessions. And I promise you'll get something from it that'll help you live a kick ass life after cancer.
I love that you do that for people and that your expertise in that, in, being healthy, having a healthy body, because again, as we know, having a healthy body, both, nutritionally and physically, really is instrumental, very helpful in helping us move through the cancer process. I know that I had a very healthy body when I got cancer. And I do believe that because of the way I was eating and because of what I was doing physically with my body, really did help me get through it
Mm-hmm.
better than someone who does not have that
Mm-hmm.
healthy body. So thank you for that. Well, I appreciate again your expertise, your lived experience, your, just your everything that you have brought to this conversation, Brynn. And to my audience, thank you once again for joining us on this episode of Test Those Breasts. And I really would appreciate it if you would go to your favorite platform that you listen to and rate and review this podcast. It's very, very helpful. And we will see you next time on the next episode of Test Those Breasts. Bye for now.